It was one of those quiet Saturday mornings that felt too peaceful to trust. Sunlight slipped through the curtains, dancing across the floor, while I flipped through the usual pile of bills and flyers. My coffee was still warm when I noticed it. A brown envelope, unmarked, slipped under the door. No return address. Just my name, written in uneven handwriting that sent a small chill down my spine. For some reason, it felt deliberate. I remember standing there just staring at it, as if the paper itself could bite. Curiosity won. I slid a finger under the flap and pulled out a single photograph. My heart seemed to stop mid-beat. There was Evan, my husband, holding another woman's hand, sunlight on their faces, both smiling like they were the only two people in the world. My breath caught. I felt my fingers go weak. The room started to spin, but I couldn't look away. I wanted to believe it was old, a mistake, some cruel joke, but the jacket he wore was the one I'd ironed last week. Every detail screamed now. Just then, the door creaked open and Evan walked in, fixing his tie, humming like everything was normal. My heart hammered in my chest, but my face stayed still. "Morning, honey. You look like you've seen a ghost," he said, smiling the same smile from the photo, the one that now felt like a blade. My throat tightened, but somehow I found my voice. "Something like that," I managed, forcing a small laugh. "Rough night's sleep." He leaned down, kissed my cheek, and I swear I could still smell her perfume on his collar. Soft, floral, unfamiliar. My stomach turned, but I stayed still. He grabbed his keys, whistling under his breath like a man without a care in the world. "Dinner tonight?" he asked. "I'll be home late. Big meeting." I nodded automatically, the lie landing heavier than usual. "Of course," I said. "You're always so busy lately." When the door shut behind him, the silence felt deafening, like the house itself was holding its breath. I stood there, photo in hand, until my knees almost gave out. That's when it hit me. This wasn't random. Someone wanted me to see. Someone wanted me to know. But why now? My mind raced through possibilities: a jealous ex, a colleague, or maybe the woman herself. My heart thudded against my ribs, torn between rage and disbelief. I looked down at the photo again, tracing Evan's smile with my thumb, and realized something terrifying. The man I thought I knew had been a stranger all along. I sat on the couch, the photo still burning in my hand like a confession I never asked for. The walls around me felt smaller, like they were inching closer, trapping me with the truth I could no longer unsee. I tried to breathe, but every inhale tasted like betrayal. The morning light that once felt gentle now seemed cruel, exposing every corner of a life that suddenly didn't belong to me. My heartbeat filled the room, uneven, angry, scared. I thought about the little things I'd ignored, the late nights, the unread messages, the sudden showers after work. Every red flag I'd painted white just to keep our peace. I wanted to scream, but instead, I whispered his name, as if saying it out loud might summon the man I used to know. But that man was gone. In his place stood someone who smiled in daylight while holding another woman's hand. My phone buzzed on the table, snapping me out of my haze. A text from him. "Don't forget to pick up the wine for dinner tonight." My chest tightened. I almost laughed at the absurdity of it, how normal he sounded while my world had just been cracked open. I looked back at the photo one last time and slipped it into my drawer. Whatever this was, it wasn't ending quietly. It was only beginning. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that photo. Their hands, their smiles, the ease of it all. By morning, I felt hollow, like someone had scraped out everything inside me and left only questions. I needed answers, and I knew exactly who could help me get them. Nina, my best friend, my safe place, the one person who could look at my chaos and make sense of it. I grabbed the photo and drove to her cafe. The smell of roasted coffee beans hit me the moment I walked in. Warm, familiar, comforting. Nina took one look at me and frowned. "What happened?" she asked, wiping her hands on her apron. I didn't answer right away. I just slid the photo across the counter. Her eyes widened, and for a moment, even she was silent. "That's Evan," she said carefully. "Where was this taken?" "I don't know," I whispered. "But look at her badge." We both leaned in, the soft cafe light catching on the glossy surface of the picture. A hospital ID hung from the woman's neck. St. Mary's Medical Center. My pulse quickened. "You think she works there?" Nina asked. I nodded slowly, a new fire sparking inside me. "I think I'm going to find out." By noon, I was parked outside St. Mary's, the photo tucked inside my purse like evidence in a trial no one else knew was happening. My hands gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I'd never been the kind of woman to snoop, but that morning something inside me had shifted. Trust had been replaced by purpose. I rehearsed a dozen lies in my head before walking through those glass doors, each one sounding more believable than the last. The hospital air was sharp with disinfectant and coffee, the scent of exhaustion and secrets. I approached the front desk, my heart pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. "Hi," I said, forcing a polite smile. "I'm dropping off a lunch for Dr. Evan Carter's wife. She forgot it at home." The receptionist's fingers froze mid-keystroke. For a second, she just looked at me, her brow furrowed as if I'd spoken a foreign language. "Dr. Carter's wife?" she repeated, her tone cautious. "I don't think he's married. He's been seeing one of our nurses." The words landed like a physical blow, hollowing me out from the inside. My throat went dry. I wanted to ask more, to shout, to demand proof, but all I could do was nod weakly. Right, my mistake. I turned and walked out before my composure cracked. Behind my calm steps, rage bloomed quietly, cold, steady, dangerous. The cool air outside hit me like a slap. I stood by my car, gripping the edge of the door, staring at nothing. The receptionist's words kept echoing in my head. "He's been seeing one of our nurses." My mind replayed the photo, the badge, the smile that wasn't mine anymore. For a moment, I almost pitied the woman, whoever she was, but pity burned fast when fueled by betrayal. I wasn't just his wife now. I was his reckoning waiting to happen. Driving home, I couldn't decide what hurt more, his lies or the ease with which he told them. The man who once couldn't sleep without me by his side now spent nights in someone else's arms, under sterile hospital lights. My grip on the steering wheel tightened until my fingers ached. Every red light felt like a test of control. I wasn't ready to confront him. Not yet. I needed to know everything first. That night, as the house sat in silence, I spread the photo across the table under the warm kitchen light. My reflection stared back at me from the glossy paper. Eyes wide, heart broken, but not defeated. Someone had sent this to me for a reason. Maybe to hurt me, maybe to save me. Either way, I wasn't done. If Evan thought I'd crumble quietly, he had no idea who he married. By the time Evan came home that night, I'd replayed every lie in my head until I could taste the bitterness of them. He walked in humming, setting his briefcase on the counter like a man who had nothing to hide. "You're quiet," he said, loosening his tie. "Something wrong?" I forced a smile, that same rehearsed expression I'd worn for years. "You tell me," I replied softly. "How was your meeting?" He hesitated, just for a second, but I caught it. "Long. Stressful. Why?" I leaned back against the counter, folding my arms, pretending to be casual. "Because I got mail today, from someone who knows you better than I do." His eyes flicked toward me, then to my hand as I slid the photo across the counter. The air between us changed instantly, heavy. sharp, almost electric. He stared at the picture, then let out a nervous laugh. "Oh, come on, Laura. That's nothing. She's just a friend from work." His voice was calm, but his hand twitched, a small tell I'd learned to recognize years ago. "Friends don't hold hands like lovers, Evan," I said quietly. For the first time, he didn't have a quick answer. His mask slipped, just slightly, but enough for me to see the man hiding underneath. His jaw tightened. "Stop being paranoid," he snapped, his voice rising like a storm breaking. "You've always been jealous." I almost laughed, the kind of hollow laugh that comes from disbelief more than humor. "Jealous?" I said, keeping my tone calm even. "No, Evan. I'm observant. There's a difference." He ran a hand through his hair, pacing, muttering something about me ruining a good thing. The irony stung. He had already done that. He stormed off to his office, slamming the door so hard a frame rattled on the wall. For a few seconds, I just stood there, staring at that door, the same one that had hidden so many of his secrets. My hands were shaking, but not from fear anymore. It was something colder, sharper, control. He still thought I'd cry, that I'd beg for an explanation, that I'd swallow another lie just to keep the peace. But peace had left this house long ago. That night, the silence was different. It wasn't empty. It was focused. I waited until his light went out before I moved. Every step toward his briefcase felt like a heartbeat counting down to something I couldn't undo. When I opened it, the truth was waiting for me. Hotel receipts, dinner bills, and another photo. Him and her, the same woman. A weekend resort. My eyes stung, but my tears didn't fall. They froze. I sat there, the papers spread across the table like evidence from a crime scene. And in a way, that's exactly what it was. The murder of trust. The betrayal of vows. Each receipt, each smile, each signature felt like another cut, deep and precise. But beneath the ache, something steadier was building. Resolve. He thought he was untouchable, hidden behind charm and routine. But I was done being blind. I remembered the first time he lied. Something small, something harmless. A white lie about working late when he'd gone for drinks with coworkers. I'd brushed it off back then, convincing myself love was stronger than suspicion. Now I saw it for what it really was. A rehearsal. Every deceit since then had been a step toward this moment. The man I shared a bed with had been practicing betrayal for years. I picked up the newest photo, him and her at the resort, sunlight bouncing off their glasses of wine. He looked happy, freer. I felt my heartbeat steady, not race. "If he wants to live two lives," I whispered to the empty kitchen, "I'll make sure both end the same way, in ruins." I slipped the photos back into the briefcase and closed it carefully. Revenge, I realized, didn't need to be loud. It just needed to be precise. The next morning, I woke up with a calmness that scared even me. It wasn't peace. It was purpose, quiet and deliberate. Evan still kissed my cheek before work, still said, "Love you," like nothing had changed. And I smiled back, because pretending had become my new weapon. For a week, I played the perfect wife, warm, attentive, supportive. The same woman he underestimated every single day. At dinner, I laughed at his jokes, asked about his meetings, even complimented his tie. He looked relaxed again, convinced I'd forgiven whatever he thought I might have known. That's when I struck the first spark. "You should invite your colleagues over sometime," I said lightly. "I'd love to meet the people you spend so much time with." He froze mid-bite, his fork hovering in the air. "That's not really necessary," he muttered. I smiled, swirling the wine in my glass. "Oh, come on, Evan. You always say teamwork matters. Let's celebrate your success together." My voice was sweet, steady, the kind of tone that hides knives behind every syllable. He hesitated, then nodded. Sure, maybe next week. But I didn't need him to plan it. That night after he fell asleep, I crafted an invitation myself. One addressed directly to her, signed, of course, from him. The days leading up to the dinner felt like walking through a quiet storm. Everything still, but charged with danger. I made every detail perfect. Fresh flowers on the table, soft music humming through the house, the scent of roasted herbs drifting from the oven. I even wore his favorite dress, the one he always said made me look safe. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was anything but safe. I was setting the stage. Evan came home just as the candles flickered to life. Wow, he said, eyes scanning the table. You really went all out. I smiled. You deserve it, I replied, touching his arm gently. For a moment, he looked proud, almost smug. I watched him pour himself a drink, completely unaware of what was coming. When the doorbell rang, he smiled. That must be your mother, he said absently, reaching for the door. Actually, I said softly, I think it's someone else. He opened the door, and time seemed to stop. Emily stood there, the nurse from the photo, dressed elegantly, confusion flashing in her eyes as she saw me standing behind him. Emily, I said with a warm smile that didn't reach my eyes. So nice of you to come. I've heard so much about you from my husband. Evan went pale. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Laura, I can explain, he started. Please, I interrupted sweetly. Let's all have dinner. The three of us sat at the table, the air thick enough to choke on. The clinking of cutlery against porcelain was the only sound, a fragile rhythm masking the chaos beneath. I served the food with a calmness that didn't belong to me, watching Evan's hands tremble as he reached for his glass. Emily's eyes darted between us, her lips parting as if to speak, but no words came. She was realizing it too, that she'd walked straight into my trap. Evan tried to break the silence, his voice cracking. Laura, this isn't... I cut him off, my tone sweet as honey but cold underneath. Oh, don't worry, dear. I think Emily deserves to hear your version too. I turned to her, tilting my head just slightly. You see, my husband's been working very late lately. I thought maybe you could tell me if that's true. She looked down at her plate, her fingers trembling around her fork. No one moved. No one breathed. The air was heavy with things left unsaid. Secrets, guilt, humiliation. Evan's mask of control was gone now, replaced by something raw and desperate. He wasn't the man from the photo anymore. He was cornered prey, and he knew it. I leaned back, folded my napkin, and met his eyes with quiet certainty. You've always underestimated me, Evan, I said softly. And tonight, that ends. Dinner felt like a slow-motion collapse. Every word, every twitch, every silence stretching thin enough to snap. I could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the clock, the storm building in both their chests. So, I said finally, my voice steady, how long have you two been seeing each other? Emily flinched, her eyes glistening. A few months, she whispered. He told me you were separated. The word hit me like a slap. Not because it was new, but because it was rehearsed. Evan leaned forward, panic breaking through his fake composure. Emily, please, he started, but I raised my hand to silence him. Separated? I repeated, smiling tightly. That's funny. We still share a bed, or at least we did until tonight. I could feel the blood rush to my face, not from anger, but clarity. It was liberating, finally seeing the truth with both eyes open. The mask had shattered, and there was no gluing it back together. Emily's lip trembled. She looked at Evan like a woman realizing she'd been tricked too. You said she was gone, she whispered. You said it was over. His silence told her everything she needed to know. I felt an odd kinship with her then, two women on opposite sides of the same lie. But pity didn't erase pain, and truth didn't erase betrayal. "He lies to everyone," I said softly. "But he forgot who taught him how." Evan's chair scraped against the floor as he stood, desperate now. "Laura, stop this!" he barked, trying to reclaim control, but the power had already shifted. I stayed seated, calm, my eyes never leaving his. "Why? Afraid of the truth?" I asked quietly. "You've been performing for months, Evan. I just gave you an audience." He glanced at Emily, but she wouldn't meet his eyes. The shame on her face said more than either of them could. I reached for my phone, my fingers steady, and tapped the screen. "You see," I said, "I recorded our last argument. The one where you said I wouldn't understand if I knew everything." I pressed play. His own voice filled the room, angry, defensive, and cruel. Every syllable twisted the knife a little deeper. Emily covered her mouth, tears spilling down her cheeks. Evan's face drained of color. He was trapped in the sound of his own betrayal. When the recording ended, silence wrapped around us like a verdict. "Now you both know the truth," I said softly. "You can have each other, and the consequences." I stood, folded my napkin neatly beside my plate, and walked toward the door. Neither of them spoke. Evan's hand twitched like he wanted to reach for me, but he didn't. He knew this wasn't a fight he could win. Not tonight. Not ever. I stepped into the hallway, my pulse steady, my mind sharper than it had been in months. Behind me, I could hear the faint sound of Emily crying and Evan muttering something under his breath. Excuses, probably. They always came easy to him. I grabbed my purse, my car keys, and one last piece of evidence, the same photo that had started it all. It felt poetic, closing the door on the same lie that had opened my eyes. Before leaving, I sent one final message. Not to him, but to his boss. The email was simple: a few attached photos, the audio file, and a short note explaining his unprofessional conduct. His boss's wife happened to be the hospital director. The fallout would be inevitable, but that wasn't my burden anymore. I hit send and slipped my phone into my bag. Justice didn't need to be loud. It just needed to be thorough. When I walked out into the night, the air felt different, lighter, cleaner, as if the world itself had exhaled with me. The porch light cast a soft glow on the path ahead, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't look back. Somewhere behind those walls, Evan's empire of lies was already starting to crumble. I didn't need to see it fall. I'd already won by walking away. 6 months later, life had settled into something softer, quieter, but stronger. My mornings weren't filled with dread anymore. They were mine again. I'd traded chaos for calm, lies for silence, and it felt clean. I was sipping tea by the window when I heard the familiar thud at my doorstep. Another envelope. Brown, unmarked, my name written in the same uneven hand. For a second, my breath caught. A ghost from the past come to visit. I picked it up, fingers tracing the paper, half expecting another photograph meant to break me. But this time, when I opened it, there was no betrayal, just validation. Inside was a newspaper clipping. Local doctor loses license amid scandal. I stared at the headline for a long time, a faint smile tugging at my lips. There it was, the ending he'd written for himself, signed by his own deceit. I reached into my drawer and pulled out the photo, the one of him and Emily holding hands in the sunlight. I slipped it into the envelope beside the clipping and grabbed a pen. My handwriting was steady now, confident. I wrote one simple line. "You kept your secrets in the dark, Evan. I just brought them into the light." Then I sealed it shut, walked to the mailbox, and sent it back to where it belonged. As I dropped the envelope into the mailbox, I felt an odd calm settle over me. Not triumph, exactly, but peace. The kind that comes after surviving a storm you thought would never end. The street was quiet, the air crisp with the scent of rain that hadn't fallen yet. I tilted my head toward the sky, feeling the sun warm my face. It wasn't forgiveness I felt. It was freedom. The pure, unshakable kind that no one can take back. Walking home, I passed the coffee shop where Nina and I had once sat, piecing together the first clues of his betrayal. I smiled, remembering her words. "You'll know what to do when it's time." She'd been right. Back then, I'd been trembling, uncertain. Now, every step felt deliberate, every breath steady. I didn't need revenge anymore. I'd already reclaimed something far more valuable. Myself. When I reached my porch, the sun was setting, painting the world in gold. I stood there for a while, watching the light spill across the horizon. My story hadn't ended in anger. It had ended in clarity. The woman who once waited by the window for a husband's lies was gone. In her place stood someone new, wiser, calmer, unbreakable. And for the first time in years, I finally felt at home. Later that night, I sat on the porch steps with a blanket around my shoulders, listening to the world settle into silence. The cicadas hummed, the wind brushed through the trees, and somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. Ordinary sounds that once meant nothing, now grounding me in peace. Healing, I realized, doesn't arrive all at once. It creeps in quietly, moment by moment, until one day you wake up and realize you've survived. I thought of the woman in the photograph. Not Emily, but me. The version of myself who smiled without knowing she was standing in the shadow of a lie. I wanted to tell her it would be okay, that pain has an expiration date, and that truth, though cruel, is the most powerful kind of liberation. That woman had been naive, yes, but she was also strong enough to rise from the ashes of deception and start again. As the last light faded, I whispered a quiet goodbye. Not to Evan, not even to the past, but to the version of myself who once settled for less than honesty. The night was cool, the stars steady above me. Tomorrow would be different, a blank page waiting to be written by a woman who finally remembered her worth. I closed my eyes, breathed deeply, and smiled. The dawn after deceit had finally arrived.